We are getting to the third question of our last topic, and it's a question which we have been discussed on different level. It will summarize your vision of the autonomy, patient's autonomy as the concept in moral judgment. In bioethics, the principle of respect for autonomy of the personhood is widely understood as the principle that healthcare professionals have an obligation to respect patients' autonomous choices and decisions about their own healthcare. The autonomous choices, and also here we will also put the problem of the autonomous choice of the professionals to, as we have mentioned during the HIV/AIDS problem, that's the professional choice to work with such people. And for sure, the choices and decisions about the own health, that's also the question of the way how people understand its own health problem. Here we are getting the constructive level on the way how to formulate, how to make the autonomy works for the personhood and for the real interest of the healthcare of the personhood. It's also the question of the autonomy raised from the vision on the way, what does mean the human being, which we have been discussed at the genesis, at the second hour topic, at the genesis of the bioethical vision. Respect for autonomy is a core principle in bioethics, is a core principle of moral value approach over the medical treatment. Underpinning requirements of informed consent to medical treatment for example for HIV patients, and participation in medical research in case of psychiatry. Despite widespread agreement, right, because the word autonomous, the autonomous status of the personhood can be called an agreement of this point of view. Importance of the autonomy, there is a considerable disagreement about how, the way how the autonomous status supposed to be formulated, supposed to be formed. So that's the institutional procedure which we have mentioned while we were talking about the question of the methods of the bioethical research. The considerable disagreement about how the concept and the principle of respect for autonomy should be interpreted by the society and by the personality of the doctors and by the personality of the patient. Let's come to the understanding of several conceptions. We will talk about 4 of them. Decisional conceptions. Decisional conception, as you can see from the title itself, it's coming to the understanding of the decision making. It's coming to the understanding of the way how the conscious decision, how the social or personal decision have been made. If we are talking about the social decision, we are talking about the doctors, we are talking about physician, and in general the legal issue. If we are talking about the personal, that's also correlated with each other, but it implements also the patient level. And also for sure, while we are talking about the decisional concepts, we can understand autonomy as the capacity to make informed, voluntary decision about healthcare choices. And such a capacity can be taught, and such a capacity can be trained only by the educational procedure. That's why widespreading of the bioethics, widespreading of the questions of the way how to learn how to study the medical issues and the way how to make the voluntary decision choice. That's one of the approach for further development for the prognostic way in understanding of the bioethics, such as whether to accept or refuse a specific treatment or to participate in a clinical trial, because the decisional conceptions can provide you the strategy to make choices. For sure, all concepts which we're going to talk about have its specification. Only in modulating, only in the first starting and then re-understanding this, we can come to the common point of view. Decisional conceptions thus emphasize two primary conditions for autonomous choice. So this means the starting point for the decisional conceptions can be seen as the patience of subject understanding and voluntariness, or absence of external or internal controlling influence. Voluntariness can be seen as the strategy to not follow the social point of view just without understanding is it your choice, is it the personal choice or not. The question of the personal autonomy by the decisional concepts, they are concentrated on the way how this voluntary act, voluntariness, have been done and the way how it will influence the further treatment and further development of the healthcare procedure. For sure, the patient or subject understanding, that's the question of the personhood. That's not just the question of the moral choice, that's not just the question of the social decision which can be done by the patients or the doctors. It's also related with the philosophical construction of the human being itself. As far as we are talking about the changing of the point of view on the patient, point of view on the role of the doctors, we are talking about the subjective understanding of such a role, and it's also the question of the moral judgment. Beauchamp and Childress, you remember, we were getting this idea, equate autonomy with informed, voluntary and competent decision making. So you remember the strategy of Beauchamp and Childress, which were concentrated on the constructural level. Their account links autonomy closer to legal competence and to informed consent. And for sure, the legal competence is one of the stages in understanding the social interference, one of the stage in understanding of the way how people can see the changing of the legal acts. To count as autonomous, Beauchamp and Childress underlined, is an action or choice which must satisfy three conditions. Let's first condition, it must be intentional. For example, planned rather than accidental. And it's important for them that this intentional planned procedure will construct the statement of the autonomy of the patient and autonomy. Of course, they were talking about, first of all, patient. Second, their point of view is the person must be able to understand the particular decision in question, to understand the question itself. So that's why the particular decision is supposed to be seen as the scientifically proved. This requires that the person has the requisite competence to understand and make the decision, and has sufficient information, that's I have underlined, about the nature of the decision and its import. For sure, the sufficient information itself, that's the question for our information society, for the formation of the Homo digitalis. This means the person who related with the digital, with the data, and that's why the information itself is supposed to be sufficient in the way, especially in the way of understanding the healthcare. And the person can give reasons for one's decision, can give reasons for her or his decision, and is able to communicate it effectively to others. To prove such a decision making, as Beauchamp and Childress talk decision making, I have underlined it to you here, and I will repeat it once more. And the decision maker is supposed to be presented to the social community, supposed to be presented to the social responsibility bodies of the state, and to the people who are making close surrounding of the person. And of course, the question of the autonomous related to the question of autonomous, it's supposed to be effective. It's supposed to be effective. The second principle, the second, let's say, theory which constructed the patient's autonomy, that's the conscientious conceptions understand autonomy as fidelity to the goals. This means relation to the goals and concentrations on the goals, standards, norms, or principles to which a person is committed and by which one person guides the conduct. Conscientious autonomy draws attention to patients' responsibility to themselves and accountability to others, including health professionals, for the ongoing healthcare practice. And such a patient's responsibility, getting the fidelity to the goals and to the norms which have been provided by the treatment. The third and most influential, that's why we will talk about this liberation concept more precisely, more deeply, equate autonomy with the negative liberty. Yes, there's such a term which have been raised at the law, such a term which have been raised at the theory of the construction of the legal acts. There's the negative liberty. That's the right to freedom from interference by other persons or the state in one's personal life. Yes, that's the right to prevent from the interference by other persons, even the professionals, or the state in the personal life. Libertarians, yes, the supporters of the liberal approach, claim that the principle of respect for autonomy entails obligations to maximize the scope of individual choices. And such a maximizing can be done by actually the person himself or herself, and minimize social interference with individuals' choices. Such a minimizing can be done only when the person can feel themselves and protect themselves on the level of autonomy, on the level of the individual choices. Libertarian conceptions are underpinned by several overlapping philosophical justifications. The first is the liberal neutrality thesis. Each individual, therefore, in the liberal neutrality, has the right to live one's life as one chooses and to be regarded as the best judge of what is in personal interest. For sure, here liberal neutrality getting the responsibility also to the personhood. Only the formation of the person, only the formation maybe in such a way also the influence of the paternalistic for the liberal or the new liberal approach is actually the stages in the formation of the personhood, and then this liberal neutrality. Second thesis that libertarians regarded as the most important to autonomy is coercive or paternalistic interference by others or the state. The principle that a person's liberty may only justifiably be restricted in the exercise of their liberty threatens to cause harm to others, where harm usually means direct physical harm. And here we also come into the reason of the bioethical approach. You remember we were talking about the harm to others and the harm to oneself. And for sure here we are getting the interconnection once more with the liberal approach which have been distributed at the legal level, because the person's liberty just limited with the liberty of others. And so that is why the exercising of the power, exercising of the paternalistic approach of the medical judgments, of the medical treatment, supposed to be seen as the harmless. The third question for libertarians, the third reason for libertarians regarding autonomy is the freedom of choice. Freedom of choice. You remember, while we were talking about the capacity of the choices or the decision making, we were talking about the procedure, but they strictly talk about the freedom of choice as the central for autonomy. where choices is understood as satisfaction of a person's subjective preferences, no matter how arbitrary, prejudiced, manipulated, or self-destructive this might be in the eyes of others, in the eyes of the society, or in the eyes of the social environment. And here important for libertarians to concentrate on the freedom of choice and the autonomous status of the personhood. For sure, the level of understanding the patient's autonomy right now in the social communication level at the post-industrial society have produced the vision of the relational autonomy. Relational autonomy is an umbrella term referring to a cluster of theories of autonomy motivated by feminists' concerns about the impacts of oppression and social injustice on women's and men's opportunities to lead self-governing lives. That's for sure. Umbrella terms means a lot of spheres have been clustered to one general problem. That's why it's called relational autonomy. While relational conceptions generally understand autonomy as the capacity, I underline it, competent self-governance and authentic critical self-reflection, their distinguishing feature is that they seek to analyze the relational, social, and political dimensions of autonomy which have been provided by the society and the social environment. While we are talking about the formation of the values, you remember we were talking about religion, we are talking about the family itself. And right now, these relational conceptions, they are turning to the self-reflection of such an influence, and then the decision how to formate the competent self-governance which will provide the personhood to the rest. Relational theories seek to analyze the nature of such a competence, to understand the kind of social scaffolding required to develop and exercise it. Scaffolding, you understand this as the form of the concentrating procedure which first supposed to be implemented and then it will disappear as the scaffolding at the building construction. And to show how an autonomy can be thwarted by social oppression and injustice, which according to the relational theories is the most influential for searching the autonomy status, for the conflicting with the self-governance which is important for relational theories. In understanding of the autonomists in general in the bioethics, we're supposed to come to the three following conclusions. First of all, that decisional conceptions, capacity to make informed and voluntary decision as the form of understanding the decision making clearly, and such a decision is supposed to be done according to this strategy in understanding of autonomy. Libertarians, which are still influential, which will be influential because it's the part of the legal procedure in the Western world and the Western understanding of the law. The principle entails obligations to maximize the scope of individual choices and the social structure. And finally, as I have mentioned to you, relational theories who were formulated by the influence of the feministic movement understand capacity for competent self-governance and authentic critical self-reflection. Here, self-governance and self-reflection will be important for the bioethical approach of autonomy. And finally, we are viewing that the autonomous itself is the question to be discussed, and that's why you will work on this during the practical classes. Thank you for your attention for this topic number 8.